And we'll cut in now here from the coastline of Northern California, where a giant squid has washed up on the beach. You can see some onlookers there. So this squid has got to be 120 feet long before the tentacles are even stretched out. A truly amazing find here.
Amazing radio at 90.7 FM. K-Squid.
We have never seen a squid of this magnitude before. We thought they existed, and they indeed do.
KSQD Santa Cruz. Online at ksqd.org.
That's what you tune to. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. And coming up at 6 o'clock, the kooky side of crazy. Stay tuned. We'll have also first person singular, and later in the evening, jazz tracks. Thanks for tuning in to Talk of the Bay. We talk about a lot of things here, and one of those things that can affect a lot of our health, any of us who live in the Monterey Bay especially, are pesticides. Those are chemicals that are applied to our fields, and they are sprayed in large quantities. Mark Weller is our guest. He's with California Pesticide Reform. I hope I got the organization right, Mark. Let's see if we hear you. Go ahead.
Californians for Pesticide Reform, Rachel.
That's right. Okay, so we just got a press release from you telling us that right now there's some chemicals that are supposed to be banned, but now our state is recommending they keep being used. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. This particular pesticide is called 1,3-dichloropropene.
Mark, we're having trouble with your feed there. You're breaking up a little bit. Could you try rejoining again and just see if that fits? And otherwise, we'll get you on the phone, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, just try rejoining because that's not working just so well. You can log off and back on and see if that works.
Will do.
All right. Mark's going to rejoin us in just a second as he gets his audio, hopefully, figured out. But it sounds like a connectivity problem, perhaps. How about now? Okay, he'll be back. You might live near pesticide applications if you live in Watsonville or you live in Salinas. So this affects you and affects all of us. How does it sound now?
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
You're still breaking up a little bit. I think we should call you on the phone.
Okay.
All right. I'll put on a short announcement and we'll be right back.
Yep.
Stay with us. This is KSQD Santa Cruz.
Okay.
So having introduced the problem, can you explain a little more about what's happening with this new effort to push these pesticides through, and what are these bad actors that you guys are worried about?
Yeah, this particular pesticide, 1,3-dichloropropene, or 1,3-D, is the third most used pesticide in the Monterey Bay region and in Santa Cruz County. It's been used for years, but it's been especially used the most since about 2011. And we're very concerned about it because it is a carcinogen. It was first registered in California in 1970. It's a soil fumigant that's used to control pests in the ground. It was originally made by Dow Corporation. It's a drift-prone fumigant that's used to kill the organisms in the soil prior to planting. And it's mostly used in this region on berries, but across the state on almonds, on sweet potatoes, walnuts, carrots, and then in southern Monterey County on grapes and wine grapes. And our concern is that while the immediate exposure symptoms are, irritation of the skin and nose and nausea, vomiting, headache, things like that, bad enough. The long-term effects, when you're exposed over a long period of time to even very small amounts, is that it causes cancer, it can pollute groundwater, and it damages the lining of the nose. It's so dangerous that 34 countries have banned it, but not in the United States. So we have been so concerned about this that we've been pressing our Department of Pesticide Regulation, which regulates pesticides, to reduce its use. And we've had to take them to court. It's taken years, and we finally basically pressed them to make a new regulation. And our concern is their new regulation is actually weaker than the one before. So that's where we are now.
It must be very frustrating to have gotten this far and then have a new regulation just weaken the old one.
Yeah.
What do you think that's all about? I mean, why did that happen?
Well, of course, our state and in other parts of the country where big agriculture is involved, they have huge amounts of power. Huge amounts of political power through campaign donations, and the fact that they are an enormous part of the money generating in the state. So we have a structure of regulation that is largely unaccountable to the public. We cannot, for instance, make any regulations about pesticides through city councils or boards of supervisors. A city can ban, say, Roundup on its own property, but it can't, tell a grower that it needs to stop or reduce. Only the state can do that, and that makes it especially hard to press on them when the state is, in some ways, kind of bound up in this game of money talks.
That's very discouraging when the health of the citizens is involved.
Yeah.
What kind of forces are arrayed to try to press back the other way? Your group has been there for a long time fighting this.
Yes.
Who are your allies?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the pesticide reform movement, some people trace to 60 years ago when Silent Spring was published by Rachel Carson. And around that same time, the United Farm Workers really started the first attempts to reduce the use of pesticides. And they even got some of the first bans on pesticides through their union contracts. That is, even though the state wouldn't regulate DDT, for instance, they got growers to stop using it in places where they had organized the union. So farm working unions, farm worker allied nonprofits have been a big part of this press back against the use of these pesticides. Again, large proportions of them banned in other countries, but not here. And in our region, the teachers, especially in the Pajaro Valley Unified School District, and then many others in Monterey County have been involved in this fight, which has been going on for generations, not just recently.
That's the Safe Schools movement, right? They're trying to get them to have a buffer around schools, which seems to make sense since children are developing still and their bodies have much less tolerance for poisons like pesticides. Absolutely.
I mean, children are definitely the most vulnerable. And I was talking about how this fight's been going on for generations. And basically a generation ago, in 1999, a parent at Ohlone Elementary School, which is just south of the Santa Cruz border, just beyond the Pajaro River at Ohlone Elementary, sued the state, claiming racial discrimination because the state allowed the use of pesticides like 1,3-D that harmed their kids, and Ohlone is like 99% Latino, right? And that was discriminatory. And the federal government slow-walked an investigation for 12 years, but at the end of 12 years, they said, "Hey, you're right. This is racial discrimination. The policy does allow for disproportionate harm to Latino kids." Unfortunately, the remedy was not really to protect the farm worker children and the children that go to Ohlone Elementary, but to plant a pesticide air monitor on the campus of Ohlone Elementary School. And that started at the very end of 2011. Remember, the lawsuit began in 1999, so justice moves extremely slowly, if at all. And so this brings us back around to 1,3-D, because 1,3-D is one of the pesticides that's measured at that air monitor. And what they've found since 2012, in every single year, the pesticides captured in the air, the 1,3-D, has been above what our own state Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment says is safe. The Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, otherwise known as OEHHA, the acronym, they have recently set a safe harbor level of 0.04 parts per billion. That's the level at which one can expect one extra cancer from exposure out of 100,000 people. Above that, we start to get more than 1 in 100,000. And that's the level at which usually we regulate, we mitigate, we do something about a chemical or material that causes cancer above that rate. The current rates we're seeing at Ohlone Elementary School are 2.5 times above that on average since 2012, since the first full year of testing at a children's elementary school in North Monterey County. So we expected and we had hoped that the state, in their new regulation, would crack down on 1,3-D, would set reduction goals, or maybe even ban it. But instead, what they've done is they've taken off the caps. They haven't limited how much you can use, but limited how one can apply 1,3-D. And our concern is that's woefully inadequate, and it's based largely on computer models and not on real-world experiences.
What I'm hearing you talk about is a massive guinea pig experiment done on children.
Absolutely, yes. The children are the guinea pigs. Cesar Chavez said that farm workers' children are the canaries in the coal mines of our agricultural economy. They demonstrate the effects of pesticides before anybody else, and that's our concern, that we're just kind of using them rather than protecting them. And look, this stuff, we don't need it. Other countries can grow berries and nuts without it, and they've demonstrated they can for decades. And so, it's clearly to us an example of environmental racism, and that's not supposed to be legal.
There are laws against that, and if I'm not mistaken, it's even been mentioned, in recent political campaigns. The actual words "environmental racism" have been used by various candidates. Do you see any backup for the rhetoric that was being mentioned, or is it all just hot air?
Well, at the federal level, there is a bill sponsored by Cory Booker. And Rachel, I'm so sorry, I don't have the name of it right in front of me. It's one of those long named things, but it's an overall package of pesticide reforms that would ban some of the most dangerous ones. And then also says that the 72 pesticides used in the United States that are banned in the European Union should at least be reviewed immediately. And this is at the state level. That's our problem. We don't really have, we certainly don't have anything close to a majority of legislators who are willing to take on big ag and big pesticide companies.
And lest people get too sanguine about having a supermajority of Democrats, this would have been, if the Democrats cared about pesticide reform, you would think there would be a lot of bills working their way through the legislature in California, which is the biggest user, I believe, of pesticides in the country, if not the world.
Absolutely. In the country, I'm sure about that. I'm not positive about the world, but possibly.
The number, when you look up the tonnage of pesticides, you think, well, that's a fumigant. How can you have tonnage? But these are the dry weights, I guess, before they get mixed. It's pretty astounding. Maybe you could share with us some of the numbers of these bad actors that you're talking about being applied on our local fields.
Sure. Well, with in Santa Cruz County with 1,3-D, for instance, the pesticide was banned between 1990 and 1995. So since then, in the 2000s, the average use was below 100,000 pounds in Santa Cruz County. And then it just shot up during the 2000 teens. It reached over 500,000, 500,000 pounds in 2015, has gone down a little bit since then. But the levels that this generation are experiencing, that the kids at Poloni Elementary School and in the surrounding area of Pajaro Valley are experiencing, are well above, are many times above what generations experienced in the 1990s and 2000s.
So we're going backwards, is what you're saying. If you just joined me, I'm speaking with Mark Weller. He's director of Californians for Pesticide Reform, and they're highlighting a recent potential decision to weaken pesticide rules that affect all of us living near the fields in Watsonville and Salinas and Pajaro and parts of Santa Cruz County in general. What can people do? This is always the question, and in the last 15 minutes, I want to kind of take up the part of, you said Big Ag has its fingers in the back pockets of many politicians. What about on our Central Coast? What are the positions of our California legislators? We just have a new one coming on, Gail Pellerin, who will be our assemblywoman. She's getting sworn in, pretty soon. What do you think the existing ones who are still in office, where do they stand? We have Mark Stone. We have John Laird, who was in the resource department before that at the state level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. At the county level, we have a very recent experience about this. Not only groups like ours, Safe Ag, Safe Schools, and Californians for Pesticide Reform pushed this, but the civil grand jury itself sent to the supervisors their recommendations that the supervisors pushed for a pesticide notification system in Santa Cruz County, and the supervisors ignored it. They talked about it one day and nobody voted on it or pressed the ag commissioner in our county to do anything about it. So we need new ones, and maybe Ms. Pellerin will be better at this. I know she has certainly said the right things when she was campaigning.
She just to correct you, she's a state assembly woman.
I'm sorry, state assembly, not county, not county.
So you were saying county didn't have the power.
I totally screwed up.
That's okay.
You're right. You're right. Yes. So we need new county supervisors, unfortunately, and then also at the assembly level, what we need are people in the past. In the past, we had in the state Senate, we had Bill Monning, who has been fighting for pesticide reform for many decades. Going back to the 1970s. So we've had some champions from this region, but the issue, of course, is you've got to get 50% plus one, right? And we're not even close to that. And the other problem with the structure of our politics is all ag bills go to the agricultural committees in both houses, and they usually die there. I would say the last significant pesticide legislation was in 2001. It's been that long. So really, the decision makers are at the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. They're unaccountable. They're appointed, so we have to put public pressure on them. They are under the CalEPA. They're part, under that umbrella. There's a new CalEPA director, Yana Garcia, who comes out of environmental justice organizations. So we have high hopes for her, and we hope that she can press on the leaders at DPR who have not been good for public health. And then locally, the only person who has any power to make pesticide regulations are the county ag commissioners. And in our county, we have Juan Hidalgo, who I think most of us believe is one of the better county ag commissioners. However, unfortunately, it's not a very high bar. And the ag commissioners usually don't do anything regarding public health beyond what they're ordered to do by the weak regulations in California. So what we can do is make sure that when the public hearing happens for this 1,3-D regulation on January 18th at 9:30 in the morning, that people join through Zoom or join us on an early bus when we're heading out to Sacramento to make public comment and probably protest to push the Department of Pesticide Regulation to do the right thing by the people and not by the pesticide companies.
You need to have a lot of voices to out-drown the money, don't we?
We do. And one example of that, Rachel, is just this past week, there were 3 public hearings about plans for a statewide pesticide notification system, which would be the first in the world. And so while that's exciting, much like the 1,3-D plan, the current plan is fairly weak. And so hundreds of voices, probably closer to 1,000, spoke up at these 3 hearings, and the people, I would say, outnumbered Big Ag and the pesticide companies at least 20-1 during that public comment session. So, and that is, I hope that is going to be hard for the Department of Pesticide Regulation to ignore.
Well, if people want to get involved in advocating for better pesticide laws, what besides going up there, and you should probably tell them how they can go up there in January.
Yes.
We'll do that in a minute. What are some other ways people can advocate in addition to going to hearings and speaking up about the health of our communities?
Yes. Well, pushing back on pesticides is one of the more difficult social justice movements to be a part of, because of this lack of any kind of local power that's restricted by the laws. So it requires groups, I would argue, like ours, that focus on, that concentrate on reforming pesticides. And so if we are a growing organization and we want to see more and more people join us, one of the things that the local branch of Californians for Pesticide Reform does, Safe Ag, Safe Schools, is we have monthly meetings that we hold in Greenfield and Salinas and Watsonville, we're doing more in person now than the last several years. And we would love for people to join us during those meetings where we plan our next steps and plan to push for new policies to protect farm worker communities especially. People can contact me. I can connect them to the local organizers. My email is mark@pesticidereform.org. My phone is 831-325-1681. And, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to, if your first action wants to be taking the bus to Sacramento to speak about your concerns about the 3rd most used pesticide in Santa Cruz County that's banned in 34 countries, we'd love to have you with us.
That's great. I'd love to have you come and talk to my class, which is called Social Justice and Community, because they're up at UC Santa Cruz. They're first-year students, and they're coming from all different places to be here in Santa Cruz. They don't know that much about the local struggles to get a healthier environment, and they might be very interested. So when we meet again, perhaps we can talk about that, about maybe having you be a guest at some point in one of my classes. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, Mark, is that K-Squid is on the verge of expanding its signal to all of Monterey County, all the way through Salinas, Prunedale, Chular, Gonzales, Carmel, Monterey. And we would be reaching more people that cared about this issue, that live right smack in the middle of this story. And so I want to, just have you be aware of that in case you'd like to maybe do more regular stints on letting us know what's happening with this fight, or just knowing that this is your community station and this is a community issue for people living in our region. So just wanted you to know that you're always welcome on our airwaves. And if you want to be a regular contributor, we'd love to have you check in occasionally. And finally, I just wanted to ask you personally, how you got into this work, because you just said it was a really hard battle because of the forces arrayed against you in big money. So tell me what gets you up in the morning about this work and doesn't keep you discouraged.
Well, yes, I kind of lucked into it, Rachel. I had just ended a long work relationship with the local hospitality union, Unite Here, Local 483, a terrific union. And I had an opportunity to organize with this new organization. Well, California Pesticide Reform started in 1996, but it was really kind of restarting in. Yep. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, and so then I ended up working with Safe Ag, Safe Schools and learning about pesticides and understanding that it's one of the most prominent and most invisible regional public health issues that, and also a worker issue as well. That it's been an important challenge, I think, for anybody. And, I'm old now, so experienced. I thought I lend a hand.
Well, it's great that you're doing it, and what an organization you have. Why don't you give out the information one more time slowly for people who have no computer, but they have their pencils out, who want to get involved?
Great. So our statewide website is pesticidereform.org. And my email is Mark, and that's Mark with a K, at pesticidereform.org. And my cell phone is 831-325-1681.
Great. Mark Weller, thank you for being here on Talk of the Bay. Really appreciate your time and the information you shared with us tonight.
Rachel, thank you for giving us time.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too.